For quite a while in the popular music business, there's been an influx of artists who have come to prominence through the medium of television. You're probably familiar with shows like The Voice, American Idol, and other such programs that have showcased ordinary people making their way through televised competitions to achieve superstardom. But other artists can become popular by starring in a television show. Such shows focus on the concept of living life as a popular music act and the varying misadventures they encounter. In addition to their work on said show, these artists may also release their music in sort of a cross-promotion of themselves. I'm sure you can name some successful artists like this, and I'm here to talk to you about one of the most famous, if not the most famous of such acts, the Monkees. In 1966, the Monkees debuted on television and became an overnight sensation. The group was the product of TV producers Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson. Having seen the Beatles in their debut film A Hard Day's Night, the two men were inspired to create something in that vein for the small screen. After pitching the concept to NBC, Schneider and Rafelson went about finding young men for the part of the band members. After auditioning over 400 guys, they found 4 of them who would become the Monkees. A typical day for the group would consist of work on the TV show in the morning and work on their music at night. The TV show was largely a product of its time. It mainly consisted of the adventures the Monkees had from day to day as a rock and roll group. The stories were generally fast-paced and quirky, with many quick actions and witty dialogue. A lot of the expressions and gimmicks used in it are very much dated now.
This spy thing just isn't in our bag.
Generally, each Monkee's personality was defined by one character trait. Mickey was the goofball, Peter was the dummy, Mike was the straight-laced leader, and Davy was the eye candy. And I guess there were some other biographical traits you could learn from them too, like Davy being from Great Britain while the others were American.
Why not take little metal bottle tops and nail them to your living room floor? It gives you the impression that you are walking upon little metal bottle tops.
Once or twice during an episode, a Monkees song, which often had nothing to do with the story, came on and a monkey romp sequence ensued. In retrospect, these moments could be considered prototypical music videos. While the Monkees weren't the first group to engage in this sort of technique, they did help to popularize the notion of using short films as a means to promote music. The music has aged a lot better than the show has. The Monkees' music production was initially supervised by a man named Don Kirshner, head of the Screen Gems music division. Considered the man with the golden ear by the music industry, he was given full control of the songs the group would sing, as well as the music producers and writers. Quite a few great songwriters worked with the group, including Neil Diamond and Carole King. The only way in which the Monkees were involved in the recording process at the beginning was the supplementation of their vocals. This didn't sit well with Mike or Peter, both of whom were experienced musicians. It also created a persistent rumor that the group was incapable of playing their instruments. Now, the Monkees weren't the only act whose producers didn't allow them to play their instruments on their records, but they were probably the most notorious in this case. They wanted the opportunity to play and sing on their own compositions, but the producers, Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, wouldn't allow it. Kirshner felt that it was his job to put the music together and that the Monkees had no business taking control of anything. He also argued that they lacked experienced musicianship and had little talent. Now, I can understand that it's the music supervisor's job to make sure the best tunes go out, but at the same time, it's not wise to shortchange and degrade the people working for you, especially the performers themselves. Early on, Mike Nesmith was given the opportunity to produce a couple of his own tunes for the Monkees' first records, provided he didn't play on them. Under Kirshner's tenure, the Monkees had #1 hits with the songs Last Train to Clarksville and I'm a Believer. In between takes on the set, the Monkees rehearsed together as a group, playing their instruments. Though Mickey was new to the drums when he joined the Monkees, with enough rehearsal, he became competent enough to function in said role, and in late 1966, the Monkees went out on tour for the first time. Though rumors persisted that the group could not play a lick of music together, when they went up on stage and performed in front of over 15,000 people, the Monkees showed the world that could. Though not virtuosos by any means, the Monkees managed to entertain crowds wherever they went. All of this did not stop Don Kirshner from backing down, however. In January of 1967, the Monkees were shocked to find that their second album had already been released without their knowledge while they were on tour. Having no input into the track selection, album cover, or anything made the battle between Kirshner and the Monkees intensify. Mike Nesmith went on to say that More of the Monkees was probably the worst album in the history of the world. I wouldn't go as far as saying that, but having listened to the album myself, I do agree that they could have chosen some better songs for it. The best stuff from it you can find on any Monkees Greatest Hits album. Bringing their complaints to show producers Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson, the Monkees were finally given the chance to make their music the way they wanted. It was agreed that the B-side of their next single, as well as their third album, Headquarters, would showcase the group playing the instruments themselves. With the help of their new producer, former Turtles bassist Chip Douglas, the Monkees were now in charge of their musical destiny. While the album may not have sounded all that different from the Monkees' previous records, it was, to the band themselves, their first true album as a group. Despite being forced to step aside to an extent, Kirshner remained undeterred. In February of 1967, he released the next Monkees single, A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You was the A-side, and She Hangs Out was the B-side. Neither song featured anything more than the vocals of Davy Jones, accompanied by session musicians. Having violated the agreement with the Monkees, Kirshner was fired. The single was withdrawn and re-released. The A-side remained the same, but the B-side was replaced by a Mike Nesmith tune that features the Monkees' instrumental and vocal contributions, The Girl I Knew Somewhere. The ousting of their musical supervisor was a bit of a double-edged sword for the Monkees. Though Headquarters topped the U.S. album charts in late June of 1967, it was knocked down a week later by the Beatles' magnum opus, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Regardless, the album showcased the Monkees at their peak performance. The high of Headquarters didn't last very long. Because the Monkees weren't a band in the natural sense, i.e. they auditioned separately for a TV show and didn't come together naturally the way bands usually do, functioning together as a group was rather difficult. Though they were able to play music together, the four of them didn't have enough in common musically to function as a band in the realistic sense. They soon realized the difficulty in maintaining themselves as a group. For their next album, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited, the Monkees employed session musicians to augment their performances. They essentially reverted to doing what Kirshner had done for their early recordings. Only now it was the Monkees themselves that were overseeing the production. They still played and sang on these songs, but they had a lot of outside help from their music-making friends. Hit songs like Pleasant Valley Sunday and Daydream Believer came out of these sessions. Functioning together as a group quickly became a thing of the past for the Monkees after their fourth album. Much to the dismay of Peter Tork, who liked the group effort, each Monkee began showcasing their different musical tastes on the fifth album and producing their songs separately. With no central authority figure in place, the Monkees were essentially a group in name only. Like the band's camaraderie, the popularity of the Monkees was fading too. In March of 1968, the television show was canceled after 2 seasons. A theatrical film called Head was put into production to showcase the group on the big screen. When it finally premiered in November, it was a commercial failure, partly because of the lack of any strong promotional campaign and partly because of what it was. Basically, Head does not have a plot, and it mainly consists of multiple vignettes that showcase the dark side of public superstardom and of being the Monkees. Quite the opposite of the television show. Alienating their fans and confounding the critics at the time, the film was a nail in the coffin for the Monkees. At the end of 1968, Peter Tork, frustrated by the group's indifference toward one another, bought out his contract and left the Monkees. The remaining 3 tried to recapture the popularity they once had over the next year, appearing on varying television shows, releasing a couple albums, and even touring over the summer. But try as they would, they couldn't recapture the Monkee mania that had made them so famous. Finally, Mike Nesmith left the group in the spring of 1970 to begin a career as a solo musician in the field of country rock. After one last album together, the remaining Monkees, Mickey and Davy, went their separate ways too. This may sound like the point where the Monkees drifted into obscurity and we never heard from them again, but that's not the case. 15 years after they had originally disbanded, the Monkees TV series was rerun on MTV. This helped to create a new wave of Monkey mania, and Peter, Mickey, and Davy went out on tour to an enormous throng of fans and commercial success. It was enough to get their original albums back on the charts and even spawn a new top 20 single and album. Mike had other commitments, including his Pacific Arts video company and other such endeavors, and was largely out of the picture at this time. Besides, a $25 million fortune inherited from his mother, who invented liquid paper, kept him financially well off. He did reunite with the other Monkees for their 30th anniversary and recorded another album and TV special with them in 1996. On and off reunions of the Monkees have taken place since then without Mike. The death of Davy Jones in 2012 did help to bring the group back together again, and the remaining Monkees have since undertaken another reunion tour for their 50th anniversary. Their most recent album, Good Times, has become their highest charting record since 1968, proving that the Monkees still endure and could make good music even to this day. So why do I share the story of the Monkees? They have a greater influence than you might think. Numerous bands have been inspired in some way or another by them. One big thing that I think makes their story so unique is that they rebelled against their supervisors and got the opportunity to actually work as a real rock and roll band instead of just playing one on TV. The expulsion of Don Kirshner had its pros and cons. It gave them a say in their music production and let them take control, but it also showed them the difficulty in being a real band. Ironically, it was that independence they gained that drove them apart. Was it wrong for them to go against Don Kirshner? No. I don't believe they were acting to devalue his craftsmanship, nor were they just being rebellious. They simply wanted a fair say and were establishing their conditions for the working relationship. As a supervisor, Kirshner did have his merits, but he got a little too big-headed, particularly in saying the Monkees lacked talent. Now, the Monkees may not have been the pop music innovators that the Beatles were. They didn't scale any new heights in pop music or revolutionize the industry. That being said, I don't think it's fair to straight up ban them from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Do I think the Monkees are the greatest band of all time? No, but I do think they are a great band nonetheless. Despite being one of those manufactured acts that many tend to deride, that didn't stop them from making good music. Whether it was Jerry Goffin and Carole King or Mike Nesmith or one of the other Monkees that wrote the tunes they sang, the group made some great songs that still hold up well today. For a lot of more recent boy bands, that can be the case too. NSYNC and Backstreet Boys songs from the late 90s and early 2000s still hold up. I've listened to a few of them recently and they're still just as good as I remember them. A group doesn't need to have widespread critical acclaim to be good. Sometimes bestsellers and chart toppers get there just because people really like them. If they're lucky, boy bands like One Direction could be as well remembered 50 years down the road as the Monkees are now. When it all comes down to it, the Monkees were a great musical group with some great tunes, and they deserve at least a little bit of respect for that. Of course, I know that music is a subjective medium, and you may or may not enjoy the music of the group, but if you're willing, I recommend starting off with a greatest hits album of theirs and seeing where it takes you. Who knows, you may find yourself getting quite a kick out of the band that loves to monkey around.